What's up, everyone? Welcome to today's live Q&A. I'm Nate Schoemer, and if you're here because you want your dog to listen better, respond faster, and truly understand what you're asking, you're in the right place. Today is all about helping you get the most out of my course from novice to pro. Whether you're already inside the course or just checking it out, I'm going to walk you through how it works, how it's structured, and why it's helping so many dog owners see real progress. I'll break down the full layout, answer common questions, and then open it up for your live questions. So stay tuned and drop your thoughts in the chat as we go. Let's dive right in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up the course for everyone to see, and we're going to walk through how it looks when you're on the Sit, Stay, Learn platform and how my course is structured. So give me a moment as I pull that up. Sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties here. All right, excellent. Okay. Here we go. Let me switch to the other side. Okay, this is what Sit, Stay, Learn looks like. This is their home page. And if you're looking for a course, just go to Shop Courses up at the top left. Click on that and it's going to pull up all the different courses that they have on the platform. And you can choose how you want to organize it. Right now, it's as best selling. So you see my buddy Larry crushing it at the top. And here's my course, From Novice to Pro, The Ultimate Guide to Dog Training by Nate Schoemer. Once you're in, this is what the back end of the course looks like. So to the right, you can see all the different sections, and when you click on these, it'll break down each video. Now the time on the side, that represents the time of this full section. So this entire section is 13 minutes and 46 seconds. If we look at some of the other ones, this section's much longer. Well, actually, it's not much longer. That one's 16 minutes. This one is 4 minutes just about. And this one is much longer at almost 2 hours. So it's the full section. Now you can jump around however you want. And I'll tell you what works best and how I structure my training when I'm working with a new dog. It was difficult for me to organize this in a way that's as easy as possible to follow and to go through it step by step. And I've had people reach out and ask me, what do I think the best approach is when they're going through this program? Should they do it in order? Should they jump around? One of the best ways, if you have the time for it, is to watch the whole thing through, probably at 1.5 speed or even 2x. Get the information so you know how the course is structured, and then you can strategize and go back and follow the steps that's going to work best for your goals and your dog. If you saw the video that I posted yesterday on YouTube, at the very beginning I mentioned that people often talk about having to structure training and create something unique for each dog, but that's only partially true. And the reason why I said that is because there's a process in which dogs learn, and we need to follow that process if we want to increase the speed in which they learn, and we want to make them, or not make them, but have them do it in a way that's fun and enjoyable and wanting them to come back for more. And then we adjust each step according to the dog that we're working with, as well as the goals that we have for the dog. And that's something I failed to mention in the video yesterday. So we adjust according to our personal goals, and we adjust according to the dog we're working with. Some examples could be if I'm training a protection dog, I may approach the training much different than if I'm training a pet. Actually, I would approach it differently. Or if I was training a service dog. Anything like that, we're going to adjust because our goals are going to be different. Now, this course was designed specifically to enhance handler skills. I'm a big believer that if you can improve your skills as a handler, you can make most dogs look really, really good. There's a saying in the dog world where you can take a poorly trained dog and put that in the hands of a skilled trainer, and that trainer will make the dog look good. But on the other side, you could take a really well-trained dog and put that dog in the hands of a poorly trained handler, and that handler will make the dog look bad. So by enhancing your skills as a trainer, your dog is going to become much better as a byproduct. So the beginning, this is just going to be the course overview. So if you see right here, there's a welcome, and if we hit play, it goes through this entire section. So this is essentially one video. You can see it says training behaviors and overview, and then that's right down here. So you can jump to those sections, or you can hit play and watch it in order. Welcome to my instructional series. And so here I do a basic introduction, course overview, equipment. This is definitely worth listening to no matter what order you decide to go in, so you can understand how I think about dog training so it could better help you adjust the way that's going to work best for you. I always like looking at dog training not as rules that you have to follow, but rather guidelines, and then adjust according to what works best for you, which is really important. Also, when it comes to training, how much time should you be training with each dog? How long should the sessions be? Again, guidelines. We keep them short, but it depends on what we're working on, and it also depends on the intensity of the training. For example, if I'm training a service dog, when the dog is learning some of the tasks in the beginning, and I'm trying to build the love for learning, the dog wanting to come back for more, then those sessions are usually going to be very short, the same way I train most dogs. But once the dog understands the full approach of training and knows what we're doing, then I can extend the training, meaning I can take the dog out on a 2-hour training session where I'm doing mostly public access, and the dog is not having to do any sort of intense training. It's just working through things the dog already knows. We might go to one location, sit down, work on a basic downstay, getting the dog comfortable in that environment, move to another location, just things the dog would do as a service dog, so the dog can get comfortable and used to that. And that could be a 2-hour training session, but that's not the same level of intensity as a new dog starting out. So this will adjust, again, according to what you're doing and according to the goals of the dog and the intensity of the training and how well the dog understands it. If you think about, let's say, competition dogs, there's some sports out there where the dog will be on the field testing for 45 minutes. That's a long time, but that dog has done everything in that routine countless times. So it knows everything. It's not having to learn, it's just going through the motions. So the dog can handle that. So think about when you're learning something new. When you're learning something new, it could be very mentally taxing. And after a certain amount of time, you might need a break. But once you know it, like the back of your hand, then it becomes very easy to go over that information because it's not that added stress on the brain when you're learning something new. So that's how I look at it. So again, these are guidelines. Now, the way that I would go through this, number one, if you're brand new at training, I would definitely recommend going through this portion where you work on some of these food handling skills. It may seem basic, but this food handling skill section I developed because I had lots of students in the past where I would go right to certain exercises like engagement or luring or teaching the dog how to follow a leash. These things would be difficult for certain students to perform because they didn't even have down proper food handling. And I've had people mention that in comments where they say, oh, it looks so easy the way you're handling the food. It's something that you have to practice. It's not something that usually comes naturally to most people. Some, maybe, sure. But a lot of us, we have to practice these skills. And I break that down in the course, and I definitely recommend getting good at that food handling because this is going to help keep our dogs engaged. It's going to help set the foundation of the dog wanting to learn, wanting to come back for more, which makes teaching new behaviors significantly easier. And also, I want to note that just because this is dog training doesn't mean that this doesn't help you deal with behavioral issues. People often think that as a dog trainer, we have to go right to the behavioral issue and start dealing with that. But a lot of times, just by doing proper training, we change the way the dog looks at us and the world through training. that a lot of times those behavioral issues will naturally go away on their own. And if we categorize it as the main goals that people are trying to reach with their dogs, we have obedience and we have behavioral. Now, obedience is pretty straightforward. A dog's not doing something we want them to do. Of course, there is more complexity to it depending on the precision, location, environmental difficulty assessment, all that stuff. And a dog not staying in a stay. And then we have behavioral. Behavioral issues fall under 5 main categories. And it could be a combination, it could be a mix, it could be some obedience, some behavioral. But the 5 subcategories are dangerous, destructive, fear, aggression, or behaviors we don't want a dog to perform. And under fear, I also have anxiety. I believe anxiety is a form of fear, but it's fear that's happening in the future, not fear that's happening in the moment. So a dog that's afraid of something that they just saw or heard is much different than a dog that's going to be very anxious, such as separation anxiety, or the dog that only goes in the car to go to the veterinarian, doesn't like going to the veterinarian. The moment the dog sees the car, they start to go into a sort of panic or stress where they're shedding their coat, they're panting, and they're very, very anxious about what's going to happen. So these are the main categories. Now, when people look at a course like this, and a lot of people that don't really, I don't want to say understand, but haven't invested as much time in dog training, may think that, oh, you need a behavioral system or a behavioral trainer if it's a behavioral issue. You need a dog trainer if you want to teach the dog obedience. I believe that a good dog trainer, behavioralist, should be able to do both. And if you learn the skills in this course, you will have those handling skills, excuse me, to deal with most situations. So it's the 80-20 rule. This course will teach you most of the skills where it'll get you 80% or more results with most dogs. And that's exactly how I designed the course. So don't skip the food handling if your food handling's not as good as you would like it to be, because it really does make a big difference, especially in the early stages when we're setting the foundation. First impressions are everything, especially when we're training a dog. And for those of you that are dog trainers. As we go down, so this is going to be classical conditioning, engagement training, loading the markers. This is what we went over yesterday, and I need to pull the screen up so you can see it. In my video, it was the first few things that I do with every dog. And this is important because every dog, doesn't matter if I'm training a very aggressive dog or if my goals are to do protection, sport work, or just basic obedience or service dog training. I always approach training in this way. I want to have a relationship with the dog. I want the dog to trust me. I want the dog to enjoy working with me. When they don't trust us, it makes certain behaviors more difficult. So some of the fun, advanced things where we have the dog run through our leg, come back in the center, look up, maintain the center position, the dog has to trust us to do all that. If they don't trust us, they're going to be cautious or uncomfortable. A lot of times when I'm training a new dog, and this is what happened with some of the dogs in the video, is I'll go to lure the dog, let's say in a circle, and as I go to lure the dog to do the spin, the dog goes, oh, I don't like your arm coming over me. And they'll duck and move out of it. And that can often happen in the early stages before the dog trusts me completely. And they start to get it because I'll reward the dog small efforts using that concept of shaping, successive approximation towards the final picture. But that's going to be the classical conditioning. Now, in this course, I believe, it's been a while since I made it, and in the video that I posted yesterday, a few of you were asking about using one marker. So one marker that predicts positive reinforcement. This is something that I was doing in yesterday's video and also on this course. The reason why is I wanted to simplify it, and most people only need one marker that predicts positive reinforcement. And most people only want one marker that predicts positive reinforcement because it simplifies the process for them. Now, I do use 3 for my dogs, known as a continuation marker, a termination marker, and then the third one I call a secondary termination marker. We also call it a terminal marker. And it's easy to think about what our words mean to our dogs based on what the words predict. If I say good and I give my dog a piece of food, but it doesn't change the dog's circumstances, that would be an example of a continuation marker. With my dogs, I use the word yes as a continuation marker. So when I say yes, excuse me, if the dog's in a stay, they have to maintain the stay. And if the dog's not in the stay, they remain free from the stay. And I've had some people call it a stay marker. And I say, no, 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 it's not a stay marker. It's not putting the dog into a stay. And sometimes words that we use to name certain things can confuse people. So like a release marker. Someone might say, oh, I'm using my release marker. I say, what do you mean by release marker? Because for me, I have a release word, which just means I'm releasing the dog. I don't call it a marker because it doesn't predict positive reinforcement, aside from being able to be released from the position, which you may say is positive reinforcement, but I'm not giving the dog a treat. So I don't expect them, I use the word break, I don't expect them to come to me and say, where's my treat? Whereas if I use my terminal marker, which is free, my dogs run to me and say, where's my reward? And then the secondary terminal marker, some trainers might have a different name for that, but it means release plus reward, but go get your reward. So you really only need 3 or even 2 if you have multiple rewards and you want to determine or dictate which reward your dog goes to. So if I have a reward in the field and I have a reward on me, and I want to be able to say, go get that reward, or take this reward from me and let's play tug, I have to have 2 different markers for that. Because if I only have one, that means release plus reward, and the dog has 2 options, they're going to choose the one that they prefer. So if we're doing protection sport and the decoy's out in the field, and you want to release and reward the dog for a tug, but the dog says, biting the decoy is my all-time favorite thing, you use your terminal marker, your dog's going to take off and try to bite the decoy. So really only with more advanced training or very specific training do we need multiple markers that predict positive reinforcement. And when we're just using one, you may be thinking, well, what about teaching the stay? Normally in your videos, you use your continuation marker when you're building duration on the stay. And you're right, I usually do. But when I'm training most of my pet dog clients, we just use verbal praise. So instead of walking away and using our continuation marker, whichever marker that may be, good, and coming back, or yes, and coming back, we just say, good, nice job, good boy, or good girl. We just praise the dog, which dogs are very good at understanding that as well. So then any other time I'm using the marker, I'm going to release and reward. And if I want duration, I use verbal praise to let the dog know you're on the right track, you're doing the right behavior, keep it up, I might give you a treat, but this voice that I use is, yeah, good puppy, nice job, way to go. They understand that as this being a good thing, I'm going to keep doing that behavior. So that's why we've been using one marker in the videos. And if you want to keep it simple, again, one is all you need. And most of the time I use my one marker more than any of the other markers, which is free. I use that more than anything. So one marker is enough. If you want to add more as far as predicting positive reinforcement, definitely go ahead and do it and have fun with it. That's what dog training is supposed to be. It's supposed to be fun. So now if we go back, and I'm going to open it up to questions soon. I just want to get through this structure. Then we have all the luring work. So I put all the luring in one section. This is all the luring. So what you can do, let's say you want to unlock what I call teachable moments. So a teachable moment is when you are showing your dog the preferred behavior. Your dog breaks the stay and you say, I want you to go back to the stay. Your dog violates a boundary and you say, hey buddy, I don't want you violating this boundary. We have to be able to show them the preferred behavior, and when I implement what I call a teachable moment, I'm using negative reinforcement, which is often implemented through leash pressure. We can also use a tone on our remote training collar, but we usually need the leash pressure to teach the tone. So I start with the leash pressure. And the analogy that we use for this is the seatbelt analogy. You get in the car, beep, 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 you buckle your seatbelt, the beeping stops. That's basically what we're doing with leash pressure. We teach the dog how to perform certain behaviors with leash pressure. And we do this for a couple reasons. When we're using positive reinforcement, a food lure, we often want to reward the dog with the food. You don't want to lure a dog with the food a lot and not give the dog the reward. That, especially in the beginning, can become frustrating. We can do that later on as we start spacing out rewards, but not so much in the beginning. In addition, when my dog does a behavior I don't want and I show them the preferred behavior, I don't want to use positive reinforcement because I don't want the dog to offer up the mistake to go back to the preferred behavior to get the reward. Meaning, if my dog breaks a stay, my marker for negative reinforcement is the word wrong. So I go wrong. What do I want the dog to do? I want them to go back into the stay. I take the dog back to the stay. Good dog, but no treat. So I go good. And good boy, good girl, whatever. And I don't give them a treat because I don't want them to go, oh, I know how to activate a way to get a treat. I break the position, you put me back, I get a treat. Because when I say wrong, I'm not punishing the dog. I might be a little bit with the negative punishment, meaning if I'm about to give the dog a treat and they break the position and I go wrong, even though that's my signal for negative reinforcement, the dog doesn't get the treat now. So it could also be a signal for negative punishment, taking something or withholding something of value from the dog. We guide the dog back to the position, good dog. So this starts to teach the dog the preferred behavior. This is what I call a teachable moment. I don't like to do or implement a teachable moment until the dog understands leash pressure. So if I want to unlock leash pressure, if I want to unlock teachable moments, then what I do, and this is what I'm doing, this is what I do with pretty much all the pet dogs I train, I get them to do a basic lure. I want to make sure they can walk forward, they can sit, and they can lay down. Once they can do that, then I can use that to teach the basic concept of leash pressure. Meaning, when we present leash pressure, negative reinforcement to our dogs, we're presenting them with a problem. We're saying, here's the problem. Can you figure out the solution? It used to be that we would present the problem and we would wait for the dog to figure out the solution. And a lot of trainers would warn ahead of time, hey, this could be a little stressful for your dog. This could be mildly stressful for the dog. But now it's not as stressful anymore because we understand, again, we're always learning and progressing as professional trainers, that we can simply give the dog the answer and remove all the stress. So the way that I do that, if I have a dog that understands the food lure, and you know what, I could actually, I don't know why I'm going to grab the little dummy, I can show you the video. So let's go into here, and then this is all the luring stuff. So let's say we want to be able to get the dog to do leash pressure. So this is movement. Here we go, getting started with leash pressure. So let's click on that. Eddie here is going to be learning the concept of leash pressure. Now, I haven't worked with Eddie before, but he is a lab. He's very food motivated, which makes it much easier. As I said before in the beginning of this course, all dogs are food motivated. Sure, there's the food. Okay, so I'm jumping ahead to where I start to introduce the pressure to the dog. And I want you to see how it works once we give the dog the answer. So I'm just going to play this little section. So those that you are watching, hopefully the stream, the connection is smooth so you can see this. So then we go to apply the pressure, boom, the dog does the behavior that we wanted without the leash even having to become tight. I like to start with sit. I used to start with forward, which you can do, so he's already kind of following that. If I pull, sit is really, really nice because it's super convenient and you can use it all the time. So I'm gonna go take a piece of food, put it behind my back, and I'm gonna lift the leash. There's the pressure, free. And now he did sit down, so I'm going to reward that. Sometimes you're gonna luck out and the dog's just... And with this dog, I was using the word free as the termination marker. So when I said free, release plus reward. But as I said, that was the first time working with that dog. And because of that, he wasn't conditioned to the word free. He's responding off of my body language. Just going to do it like that. So there's the pressure, there's the food, turn off the pressure, give him the reward. You don't have to use a marker, but you can if you want. Now, when I take the dog into the down position, I like to be at the dog's level. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring, or actually we can just walk over to the climb bed. So I'm gonna bring the dog, place him on the climb. And anytime you do get down at the dog's level, be 100% certain that the dog's not going to try to bite you. I'm very cautious when it comes to bringing my face towards a dog's face. So if you're unsure, do not get at the dog's level. Keep yourself safe. Safety is always priority number one. Getting bit in the face, getting bit anywhere is not a good time. So always think about safety anytime you're training, especially if you're training or you're working with someone else's dog.
Climb bed. Now, when you're doing this, of course, if it's not your dog, make sure it's a friendly dog that's not going to bite at your face, and he's super friendly, well socialized, so we're not going to have any issues. So I gave him that piece right there. I'm going to take another piece, bring it behind my back. Now I'm going to pull down on the leash. If you notice, my hand is very close to the clip. So there's the pressure.
And that's important to point out because a lot of people, they'll end up grabbing lower on the leash, and so then they can't apply the right amount of pressure. In addition, I'm not applying a lot of pressure, just enough for the dog to feel it. I like to look at negative reinforcement as a cue for a specific behavior. I want the dog to understand it's a cue. Hey, this means do that. I don't want it to be something stressful. If we're thinking about the definition of negative reinforcement, we turn something on, something is applied, and then once the behavior is completed, whatever we applied is turned off. That's why it's called negative. Remember, the negative and the positive of the 4 quadrants happen after the behavior. So even though you may think, well, we're adding something, so shouldn't that be positive punishment or positive, not positive? Yeah, I mean, if you're thinking that way, positive reinforcement, it's like, no, because when the dog sits or the dog lays down, that's when the pressure's turned off. Now, if I take a dog, and let's say the dog is more sensitive, because this is a common technique and there's nothing wrong with this. If I want the dog to sit and I'm doing light little pops, nothing hard, and the dog sits and I stop doing the light little pops, that's technically negative reinforcement because I wanted the dog to do a specific behavior. Once they complied, whatever it was that I added gets turned off right away. But if I have a really sensitive dog and I start doing this, this might add additional stress to the dog. Or if I start popping forward to get the dog to walk forward, some dogs that are very sensitive, again, we adjust according to the dog, that could mean that the dog is now focused on what they perceive as punishment, even though technically it's negative reinforcement. So for me, I never want negative reinforcement to be stressful. So teaching it and teaching it the right way for me is very, very important. And so I use the positive reinforcement again to teach the dog the concept of leash pressure, which this gives us the ability to unlock teachable moments. Again, what I call teachable moments. And this is how I teach boundaries, and this is how I teach all my stays. And it makes it really, really simple for the dog because they start to understand how we communicate with them. And it becomes, in a sense, they become generalized to it, meaning, oh, every time you say wrong, you show me the preferred behavior. Excellent. And it becomes very easy for the dog to pick that up. And then once they understand the rules, if you choose, completely up to you, then you could add positive punishment. But I always tell people, really get down your timing and your understanding before you start using positive punishment. Because if your timing is off on positive reinforcement or even negative reinforcement, it's not the end of the world. Positive reinforcement, you might teach the dog something that you unintentionally taught. You didn't want to teach them that, but you did. And with negative reinforcement, delaying the release of the pressure or not turning it on at the right time can cause a little bit of confusion for the dog. So timing is important. So when we look at the order of importance, the number one most important one where your timing has to be really good is positive punishment. The one that gives us the most amount of flexibility, and why I believe all new trainers, whether you're training your own dog or you're a professional trainer, you should get really good at positive reinforcement first, because that allows us or gives us a little bit more wiggle room if we make mistakes. It's not a big deal. And then the next one is negative punishment. Negative punishment also gives us the most amount of flexibility. Remember, that's just taking something of value away. Like, oh, you don't get your treat. If you mess up the timing on that, not as big of a deal. And then you have negative reinforcement. That's this leash pressure work. So if I'm working with the dog and the dog complies, the dog goes into position and I don't turn off the pressure, it can create some confusion. Now the dog goes, okay, what do I need to do to turn off the pressure? So when we're using negative reinforcement, two most important things. Once the pressure's turned on, it cannot be turned off until the dog complies. And the moment the dog complies, instantly has to be turned off. So this is very, very important. So when the dog complies, boom, we have to shut it off. And it seems easy, but most of the time when I'm doing lessons, the person leaves the pressure on when they should have turned it off. And I'm sitting there going, turn the pressure off, turn the pressure off, turn the pressure off, turn the pressure off. Good. Like for the human. So you have to make sure you turn the pressure off. And it's always good to practice without a dog before getting the dog there. And
now I'm going to take my hand, I'm going to lure him down, release the pressure, give him the food. If he pops back up like he just did, then we're going to do another down. So there's the pressure. There's the lure, turn off the pressure, give him the food. And I'm not applying a lot of pressure.
So you can see that's pretty straightforward, but that allows us to unlock, again, what I call teachable moments. So that's going to be how we start using negative reinforcement. So if you wanted to get to that quickly, then once you do the luring, so you come down here, you do the basic luring. All this other stuff it's more advanced, but I definitely recommend doing it, even if you don't have, like, you don't need your dog in heel position. You don't need them to switch. This all helps our dog increase their understanding of learning and enhances our communication and makes us better handlers. So some of these exercises, you might think to yourself, oh, I don't need switching heel positions. I don't need center to front. I don't need that. I still recommend doing it because it's going to make you a better handler. And becoming a better handler, as I said, as a byproduct, we have a much better behaved and obedient dog. So I definitely recommend doing all those, even though you don't have to. And this is going to be where we start adding movement. So for any of these movement exercises, we're still using lure to guide the dog, but you want this foundational stuff first before you go to the lure. So if you do want to jump around, do the basic lure here, unlock teachable moment by doing the leash pressure work, go back to doing these luring exercises, and then when you feel confident, go to the movement ones, because these are a little bit harder for most people. And then at the very bottom, this is where I go into adding, so this might be worth watching too in the beginning, adding commands. So this is how we start to add the verbal command to the behavior, because in the beginning, if you've seen a lot of my stuff, I don't name commands right away. And the two main reasons is, number one, if the dog's not performing it the way that I like yet, I don't want to name it and risk the dog performing it that way with the verbal. I want them to perform it the way that I want. And so I wait till the dog is doing it the way that I like. Also, I want to make sure I can get the dog to do it every single time with the physical cue. I don't want to start creating an issue known as learned irrelevance. If I can't get the dog to do a sit or a down or flip into heel position, I don't want to say heel a bunch of times, assuming my dog understands what the word means, but they don't. We just teach them that it predicts this behavior, which possibly predicts a reward. Then if I say heel a bunch, you won't see the effect that it has, but it definitely does, because now it's probably going to take longer for the dog to learn the verbal command, because we have to get through the dog after they've developed learned irrelevance. They learn to ignore it because we said it a bunch of times without clearly connecting it to a behavior. Remember, clear communication is the most important thing when we're working with our dogs. They have to understand what it is that we want. And a lot of times someone might be trying to teach their dog something, and they might say something like, oh, the dog's being stubborn, or the dog is resisting. It's like, no, the dog actually just doesn't understand what you're trying to do yet. It's not clear to the dog. So we need to make sure we're being very clear. And then this goes into some of the other basic things like increasing motivation, spacing out rewards. A lot of people ask about this. This breaks down how I start to space out rewards and my strategy for that. Stay command for any position. Stay is easy. Often, we think stay is difficult. And I want to say we, because before I became a dog trainer and I would see a dog doing a stay in an environment with lots of distractions, I was like, oh my goodness, how did they do that? That's magic. But then once you know the process, stays are very, very easy. It's just having to know how to do it. And then we have teaching loose leash walking in heel. So this is a good exercise if you want your dog to be able to walk around, smell things, kind of relax and be comfortable without a strict heel position. And then, Yeah. And then we have enhancing training reliability with corrections. So this is where I break down how I start adding corrections. This video is actually free on my YouTube channel titled The Shocking Truth to Shock Collars. But this breaks down the exact process that I
If you want 100% reliability,
that I practice, or that I follow rather, when I'm adding corrections. So I have a very, very clear step-by-step process that I like to follow. Simple things like I want the dog to be 80% proficient on the command in the environment before I add correction. So I have to make sure the dog understands it. If I'm going to correct for violating a boundary or violating the stay command, I want the dog to understand that stay in that environment or that specific boundary. Just because my dog knows a downstay inside of the house does not mean the dog knows the downstay outside. So I treat everything as its own separate training experience for the dog. A down inside is much different than a down outside. So if I want to correct the dog for breaking a downstay outside, I have to go through the same process that I go through with the dog breaking the downstay inside, which is starting with teachable moment, dog breaks the position, I show them how to go back. After enough of those, the dog breaks the position. I say wrong, the dog goes back on their own. Great, now you know the rules in the house for this specific behavior. Next time you break it, it's going to be a no, and it's going to be a correction. I'm going to follow through with the correction. That's going to give us that reliability. And again, you can adjust this to whatever works for you. So for me, the way that I do it is if I'm working with a dog and that dog breaks the stay and I say wrong and the dog goes back on their own, the moment the dog does that, I go, okay, you now know the rules. Next time, no. Now the dog's getting a correction. And I break down exactly how I follow that process. If you want, so I've had students in the past where they go, you know what, I want my dog to respond to the wrong 5 times before I transition to the correction. That's a little harder to keep track of, but again, you have to adjust according to what works for you and what you're comfortable with. If you're not comfortable with it, you're not going to do it well. So don't do it. Do things that you're comfortable with. And I do like to add corrections into my training because I like off-leash reliability. And this goes over how I use the remote training collar as positive punishment. So this is exactly how I use it with positive punishment. I also use the remote collar as negative reinforcement, which I don't go over in this video course, but I do have videos where I explain that on my YouTube channel under the live. So this was a little long. I apologize. I haven't started asking or responding to questions yet, but now I'm going to jump to the questions and let's keep it on track with the course so we can stay on subject. I do other live Q&As constantly, so we can hit up other questions, but let's focus on specifically this course. Okay. Hello, everybody. Thanks for saying hi. Caught live at the beginning, morning dog pack. Let's go to class. 2 times with notebook is a great strategy. Yeah. Okay. Hi, Nate. I'm self-training my 11-month-old Malinois puppy. He's progressing well, but as a handler, I'm stuck on getting obedience perfected. Long stay, long sit, etc. Is that covered in the course? Yes, I do cover the stay in the course. As I said, the stay is easy once you understand it. It can be a little more difficult depending on the energy level of the dog. So there are difficulty levels based on the dog that we're working with. So a young, high energy, motivated Malinois is going to be easier to teach something like a flip finish to, a focused heel, than, let's say, any other dog that doesn't have as much energy or as motivation. But that dog might be more difficult to teach a stay to. But a stay is still easy. So I do go over the concept of proofing. Now, proofing, the way that I look at proofing, I like to simplify all the terminology so it makes sense in my head and it makes it easy for me to keep it organized. So, for example, the way that I define for myself classical conditioning is a dog's recognition of a pattern outside of their control. And whatever triggers that sequence, we get a change of behavior, whether it's good or bad. And then I describe or define opera conditioning as a dog's recognition of a pattern within their control, or at least we want them to believe that they're in control. Proofing is I increase the difficulty of the environment until the dog can reach the highest level of difficulty and still perform with proficiency. And I have what I call environmental difficulty assessment. I always start the dog in the easiest environment. I do a scale of 0 to 5, 0 being the easiest, 5 being the most difficult. It doesn't mean I can't take the dog to a level 5 environment, but I have to adjust my expectations based on the dog's training prior to that. Each environment, as it gets more difficult, we have to go back and we have to work through the steps to make sure our dog understands it. And that's really what I call proofing. That's how I define proofing. We gradually make the environment more difficult so we can maintain reliability with our dog. That's if we're going to simplify it. Now, proofing, you can make it more specific to what you're doing with your dog. So if you're trying to train a service dog, proofing that dog is doing obedience in environments that you need the dog for public access. Or if you're doing a sport dog, you have to do proofing in environments that could be specific to that. However you want to do it, but for me, that's how I define it. So I simplified. So if you're doing the stay, do the stay in easy environments and gradually make them more difficult. And the way that I like to do it specifically is, let me go back to the course and I'll show you because I talk about it here, is this. Well, it's right on this shot. So I like to take the dog's climb bed. So these are my preferred beds. So it comes from the Petcott company. They're really great. They're really sturdy. I like them. I've been using them for over a decade. And I'll just take this bed with me wherever I go. And that's how I start my stay, where I start doing the stay in environments that are more difficult. So the dog's on a stay, but they don't have to maintain a very strict position. She doesn't have to be in a sit or a down or something like that. It gives them a little bit more freedom and mobility on that platform, and that's significantly easier to teach a stay to. So I start with the easier versions, and then I can increase the difficulty as needed. But I use, as far as stays go, I call it a climb. Some people call it place. But I use the climb stay more than any other stay because it is the easiest and I don't have to watch my dog as much when they're on the climb stay. If we put our dog in a down stay or a sit stay, we have to be way more vigilant because if I put my dog in a down stay and I'm not paying attention, let's say someone rings the doorbell and I tell my dog down and I go and I answer the door. If I'm not paying attention to my dog can start low crawling. My dog can start doing all kinds of unwanted behaviors without noticing it because they're shifting a little bit here, shifting a little bit there. But with the climb, again, it's much easier to enforce and reinforce. So doing that and gradually making it more difficult is very helpful. And then also, I go over the 3Ds in dog training in that video, which is distance, duration, distraction. I believe I do, but if not, I'm going to say it right now. And the way that I look at the 3Ds, distance, duration, distraction, is I start with a little bit of duration, no distance, no distraction. And then I do a little bit of duration and distance, then I do a little bit of distance, but no duration. So I walk away, I come back. I walk away, I come back. Then I do a little bit of duration and distance, and then eventually we add all three. I start with duration and distraction, and then duration, distance, distraction. So it's progressive. The dog gets better as we add more to it. And so that's the 3Ds. But these things are going to make it much easier for you to get that long stay that you want, regardless of the distractions, is how we approach it. Okay. Let's see. Usually our dog has great attention, but occasionally he'll want to run and play with another dog. So, I mean, depends on what you're trying to do right there. So you say suggestions. If you're just talking about a stay, then I would just do the stay training that I just talked about. We don't have to complicate things. If my dog's breaking a stay because of an added distraction, I have to determine, is the dog capable of handling the stay? Have I done enough training to build my dog up to this level of proficiency? And am I asking the dog to do a stay that's easy? Again, according to how well the dog performs. I'll give you an example where I see lots of people make the mistake. They teach their dog a basic sit stay in an environment with no distractions. Then they have their dog out and about. Somebody asks if they could pet the dog. They say, yeah, of course. And then they put the dog into a sit. And then the dog is constantly breaking the sit because the person's coming up to pet them. That's way too difficult of a distraction for a dog new in training. Even if they have a good sit stay, we suddenly made the environment way more difficult and the dog's breaking the stay and then the handler's correcting the dog. And it's an unfair correction in my opinion because it was too much too soon for the dog that was not capable of holding that sit stay because the training hasn't progressed to that level yet. So again, we have to be careful of what we're expecting from our dogs based on what they currently know. training a German Shepherd and have been working with her for almost a year. She's really good at everything, but when she sees a cat, she loses control. She doesn't bark, but she lunges. So that's going to be a reactivity issue. And a lot of times when we start implementing positive punishment and we're doing it the right way, these sort of issues will go away. The dog, so let's talk real quick about motivation. Everything our dogs do is based on motivation. Access something pleasant, prevent something unpleasant, or the behavior itself is fun. Now, we can control the extrinsic motivators. And that's going to be those 4 quadrants of operant conditioning: positive and negative reinforcement, positive and negative punishment. We can have some control in saying those. Now, we can do our best to try to create self-reinforcing behaviors for our dog for things that we like them to do. Sometimes they'll do it naturally, but we can often build drive. So building toy drive is something that we often do with dogs in the early stages if we want to use toys for their training, or if they're going to be a sport protection dog or something like that. We want high toy drive because that transfers over into protection work. And high toy drive is fun because then we can tire our dogs out, we can play with them. It's something that I think is very valuable for any dog if they show some interest in it. Sorry, I was trying to remember where I was going with that. Okay, yeah, motivation. So if my dog is doing a behavior that I don't want them to do, then we control the motivation to alter their behavior. So if I start implementing, let's say, positive punishment into the training, and just a reminder, that's adding something to stop the repeat of the behavior. So a leash pop, stim on a remote training collar, something like that. And that happens after the behavior. The motivation not to receive the correction has to override the motivation to do the unwanted behavior. That's how we start getting reliability if we're going to simplify what we're looking at. Now, if I want to make sure I'm training the dog in a process that's best for the dog, then I make sure that when I am correcting the dog, it's in a situation where they can do what I'm asking them to do, and they can maintain some level of control, some impulse control. So if it's too difficult, I might have to, okay, that was too difficult. I need to try my best to avoid it. But sometimes something like a stray cat, you don't have control over that. The cat just randomly pops out. If we add a correction and the dog still does the unwanted behavior, usually if we're simplifying it, that means the motivation to do the unwanted behavior is overriding the motivation to prevent the correction. And we have to have it the other way around. So I've seen some pretty unique types of correction with dogs to stop behaviors, and I like to call this the correction event. So if we're looking at the 3 main events to dog training, we have the reward event, the reinforcement event, and the correction event. The reward event is when we're going to reward our dog. Pretty straightforward. It could be 1 treat, 5 treats, a little bit of tug play, petting, whatever. It doesn't always have to be the exact same thing. We can change it up to make the training more interesting. The reinforcement event I define as any time we're trying to get our dog to perform an action. So if I want my dog to perform an action, whether I give the dog a verbal command or I use my marker that predicts negative reinforcement, I want my dog to do something. So if I want my dog to do an action, that's a reinforcement event. It starts the moment I tell the dog that I want them to do something, and it ends the moment the dog does the behavior. Then we have a correction event. The correction event is triggered by an unwanted behavior, whether it's non-compliancy to a behavior, it's something dangerous and destructive the dog is doing, or violating a stay or a boundary after the dog has already learned the rules to that. Then I can enter the correction event. The correction event starts when the dog does the unwanted behavior, and it ends when they receive the correction. It doesn't end when they instantly comply. It doesn't end if they try to get away from us. It ends when they receive the correction. This is where a lot of people make a mistake. If you're following the type of training that I like to follow, what we find most often that happens with a dog when we mark with our no or whatever word we're using as a condition punisher is what it's called, is we get instant compliancy. Meaning I tell a dog down, dog doesn't do it, I say no, dog lays down very quickly. Or the dog violates a boundary, I say no, dog fixes themselves, jumps on the couch, no, jumps off real quick. Enters the kitchen, no, leaves the kitchen real quick. So that's what I call instant compliancy. It doesn't matter if the dog does that. It doesn't matter if they freeze. It doesn't matter if they come to me and go, I'm sorry. They still get the correction. It's cause and effect. If you're driving and you see those red and blue lights start flashing behind you, that's a marker for punishment. That's a correction event for us as human drivers. Once you see those red and blue lights, best case scenario, you're getting negative punishment. You have to sit there, you have to wait, you get a warning. Okay, now I'm late. It's no fun. That's a marker for us, the red and blue flashing lights. It's not like those lights go off, you slow down, and then the police officer goes, "Good job," and drives away. No, or else it wouldn't be very effective. So it's the same with our dogs. When we decide, okay, we're adding punishment, when the dog does the behavior, it triggers the correction event. There's nothing they can do to escape that correction. And we see that change of behavior before they get the correction. Just like we see a change of behavior before a dog gets a reward once they're conditioned. You say yes, they get excited, they open their mouth, they lick their lips, they salivate. Whatever response your dog has, that's when they're conditioned to the marker. So remember, a marker predicts any one of the 4 quadrants of operant conditioning. So what a lot of people do, and this is why they don't get that reliability, is they say no, the dog complies momentarily, they don't correct the dog, it doesn't change the behavior. And I'm guilty of it. I get lazy with my dogs. And I know this. And so sometimes, when we talk about being strict on our dogs, really, if we want a high level of reliability, we need to be strict on ourselves. We need to be strict on the rules, and we need to make sure we follow through. It's not about being strict on the dogs. It's about being strict on us. And then we'll have that more reliably trained dog. But if I implement a correction event and it doesn't change the dog's behavior, then the correction event wasn't adequate to the behavior. And again, I've seen all different types and I've learned different types. So sometimes a leash pop, oh, that doesn't work on a martingale collar. Okay, now try collar. Okay, that worked. Or they try remote training collar. Okay, that worked. Or the remote training collar, my dog hasn't done the training quickly on remote training collar. I've seen remote collars placed on a dog's waist. So the dog has a remote collar around their waist with the block right here. Dog is corrected right here. And the dog's like, oh, what was that? Oh my gosh, I don't want to bark that way again because I don't want to get correct back here. I've seen that. I see reacts, and sorry, it's saying that they're receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming. So I hope this is coming in clear. And then I've also seen a correction event where you have the dog in the center, the dog reacts, and you have a trainer and the owner, or whatever, 2 people, and they create distance from the dog. So one goes this way with the leash, the other one goes this way with the leash, and the dog gets multiple corrections, and then they come back in. That's a correction event. What happened? The dog received positive punishment initially, negative punishment through social separation, and then more negative punishment by having to maintain by themselves, or follow-up corrections, more positive punishment, and then coming back. And that's all one correction event. And I've seen different strategies work for different dogs. I always like to look at first, I have to make sure the dog understands what's going on. Once they understand it, once they believe that they understand it and they've had enough training, then I can go and follow up with that correction. So that's what I would say. Make sure you have your communication systems down. Make sure you've done adequate training in the environment and the dog knows the rules. Then when the dog acts out, implement a correction event that you think is necessary to change the behavior. So I don't want to do a correction that's so extreme the dog never wants to go on a walk again. If you're speeding 10 miles over the speed limit and you get a month jail sentence, you might go, forget it, I'm never driving again. It's not worth it. You get a speeding ticket, okay. So it has to be adequate to what they're doing. Too high creates avoidance. And that's what they call an avoidance level correction. If I take a dog on a walk and that dog reacts on the walk and I give that dog a really hard correction, I'm popping the leash constantly, continuous on the shock collar, and I'm yelling at the dog, that dog might go, forget it, I am never going on a walk again. And it's another reason why I don't like to make corrections personal. It's cause and effect. Hey, that wasn't on me, that was on you. Operant conditioning. A dog believing that they have an effect on their environment. So I hope that answers that question. I hope it answers a lot of other questions that people might be having. Usually our dog has great attention. Okay, that's the one that just went over that. I'm training my 8-week-old German Shepherd. He's doing extremely well. Me, not so much. I feel like I'm letting him down as far as form and skill, but with your help, we'll get there. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I fixed our focus heel problem with simple food handling tip from Nate. Yeah, I appreciate that. My buddy Arm & Hammer. My dog was kicking his rear end out because I was rewarding food. So we're talking about reward placement there. Very nice. Thanks for sharing that. My young high drive German Shepherd is very grabby with the treat rewards. I hesitate to use them because it is painful on the fingers. So there are a few techniques we can do with that. So one, you could try to lower the value of the food reward. This works on some dogs. Not all dogs. This is what's known as negative behavioral contrast. The dog's expecting a higher value reward. They get a less value reward. It decreases the motivation, which is usually something that's not good. But for a dog that could be really aggressive with the way they take the food, sometimes that helps. Another technique that I'll do, the way that we hold the food matters too. So my actual Charlie, my daughter calls this Charlie, but my lab Charlie, he's very rough with the way he takes food. But if I hold the food the way that I teach in my videos, I usually don't have any issues. Sometimes he'll catch the fat on the palm of my hand, which doesn't feel very good. I haven't had the need to fix it because I'm like, whatever, a little pinch. I don't worry about it too much. But if I wanted to, one of the ways that I do that is I have the food in my hand, I close my fist. The dog tries to get the food. I slowly start to open it. If they use their teeth, I close it back up. If they start to lick, I'll open it up for the licking. If they go to bite, again, I close it up. Once they start to lick, then I start to open. As long as they keep licking for the treat, I'll slowly open. Then they'll get the treat while licking for it and not biting. So you have to be good with your timing there. Moment that those teeth come out, whoop, close it back up. And after enough of these, your dog will take the treats in a more gentle way because that's the only way that works. If your dog takes it in a very aggressive way and it works, they'll keep doing that. So I hope that helps. Okay. I purchased the Accelerated Learning Dog Training book by Pamela Reed that you recommended. Really enjoyed the read, and I can tell you echo a lot of her teaching. Yeah, it's a really great book. I'll be starting up French Ring again. Very nice. French Ring is a really great sport. So happy to be here with all you dog trainers. Thank you, Nate, for the awesome videos. Thank you for your support. I really appreciate that. Tuck the food under your thumb. Yep, that helps. I use food to train an 8-week-old German Shepherd to follow food in my hand. When he takes food from my hand, I release a piece of food and move my hand further. He walks a few steps and takes the food. Excellent. Okay, I do it a few times. He stops and sits. He just looks at me. I wave my hand, signaling him to get the food. He looks at the hand, but he sits still. Then he looks back at me. He's hungry, though. So usually adding backward movement for that one. So it sounds like... So you get him to sit, he looks at you, and you're like, hey, here's the reward, but he still looks at your hand and stays sitting. Usually I'll move back and I'll start encouraging the dog. So I'll go, come on, pop, 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 pop. Dog starts to move forward. Yeah, good puppy. So again, I use the praise. I use this verbal sort of informal type of communication to get behaviors that don't need, I'm like, it's not a command. It's not a precise movement. I'm getting the dog to walk forward. I'm getting the dog to encourage maintaining a position. I use that praise to encourage movement or to encourage maintaining a position. So if we're doing a stay, even if it's a heel stay or something like that, especially in the beginning, good, nice job, very good. And then I can release them. So try that. Try stepping back with a leg, dropping that hand down, increasing that movement, that momentum, telling the dog, let's go, buddy, let's go, let's go. He moves forward. Yeah, good puppy. That works with most dogs that I train. I'm sure I don't do it right somewhere in between. I think he's outsmarting me. And dogs, I don't want to say necessarily dogs outsmart us, but dogs use, often we say, oh, we're rewarding a bad behavior, which that makes sense because we're the one training the dog. But if you want to look at it in the other perspective, dogs do train us. And what I mean by that is dogs use the quadrants on us just as we use it on them. So an example I always give, if I have a dog barking at me, bark, 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 bark. In fact, one of my lessons last week, I had a dog like that, and I was like, all right, we need to finish talking, so take the dog, put him in the house, we'll bring him back out when we're ready to work. Because to get him to shut up, if I gave him a treat, then he goes, oh, that's negative reinforcement. He barks, I give him the treat, he stops barking. So the barking went away after I gave him the reward, negative reinforcement. So they can use those things on us as well. All right, let's see. Off topic for the community. My dog is a rescue. My friend rescued her, but she was in a work accident. She's a working dog. I'm just thinking about health issues since Nate talks about genetics. Yep, a DNA kit. Okay. I smoke too many cigs to get a high pitched voice, unfortunately. E-collar is illegal in Europe. Yeah, it's unfortunate. And you can manage without, absolutely. Depends on your goals. For me, if I didn't have remote training collars, then I wouldn't have my dogs off leash. I would, if when I was doing off leash type activities, then all the dogs would be on a long line. So I'd still have a way to control them, but I'd do my best to simulate off leash freedom. Does the puppy think that why are you making me walk to take a piece every time? I'm not going to do that. I just want the food without walking. What is his thinking? I don't know exactly what the dogs think, but movement usually increases motivation. So if I tell the dog yes, and I move back to get the dog to come get the reward, that's a natural instinct that we're using to get that movement. So we're using prey drive. If we're making it fun, which we should, we're using play drive. We're also using food drive. So the dog wants to move forward to get the reward. Some dogs may not. Of course, every dog's going to be different. You might have a dog that's just naturally a very lazy dog. The prey drive was, in a sense, bred out of the dog, and so they don't have that instinct. But almost every single dog I train, once they understand the concept, they love jumping up and moving towards the reward. I jumped too many steps. Okay. Yeah, if you skip steps, we all make that mistake. Just go back steps in the training, which it sounds like you're already doing that. Looks like demo dog. Let's see. I took friendly fire playing tug. That can happen. Yeah, you can get bit during tug. Okay, when I started with my poodle, I was worried about leash popping her into another dimension. Yes, so smaller dogs, like I don't like doing leash pops on really, really small dogs, just because I don't want to accidentally pop them too hard. Again, we always want to make sure that we're keeping the dog safe. So again, safety for me and the dog is always priority number one. Can your dog learn the behavior on the verbal cue while spacing out rewards? I thought you had to make the dog understand the verbal before you started spacing out rewards. That's a good question, and that's how I used to do it. So one more time. Can your dog learn the behavior on the verbal cue while spacing out rewards? I thought you had to make the dog understand the verbal before you started spacing out rewards. So that is something that I used to do where I said, okay, I'm going to use continuous reinforcement until the dog is responding on the verbal. So sit, yes, reward. Down, yes, reward. Come, yes, reward. But since then, again, I'm always trying to become a better trainer. And so I'm always trying different things. I'm always doing different courses, constantly trying to learn, trying to see what works better. And since I've switched to this new style, I'm getting better results. So I do continuous reinforcement now until I can get the dog to perform the behaviors I want with the physical cue. So once I have that down, if I can flip my dog into heel, left, right, go through the center, come back, spin, it's like a dance. Once I get to that point, that's when I start spacing out rewards. Because the way that I look at it is if I tell the dog sit and I lure the dog into a sit, and then I say down, and then I lure the dog into a down, heel, and then I lure the dog into a heel, down, then I lure the dog into the down. I'm giving the dog all the answers. I'm making them do a bunch of different positions, and then I reward them according to how much I made them work. So if I'm working a dog and I make them do 20 behaviors before they get a reward, I'm going to make that reward bigger. I'm going to make a better reward event for how much the dog had to do to get to that reward event. And it's always about reading the dog. So yes, they can most certainly learn the verbal commands when we start spacing out the rewards once we get to verbal commands. And that's what I teach in this course. And that's been working much better for me. I end up getting dogs that perform better, more reliable, with more enthusiasm. But I'm not doing a bunch of duration still. So I might do sit, and then down, and then come, and then down, sit, and then I'll release the dog into a reward, but trying my best to randomize it. We are also creatures of habit, and we are very much pattern. I'm not wording that right. Grammar not so good today, but you get what I'm saying. We have habits of creating patterns ourselves, and so it's very hard to randomize, but we want to try our best. And you can tell if you're starting to do any kind of unintentional pattern training by the way your dog performs. So this is something I mentioned before. I have a tendency to do this when I'm training dogs. I'm teaching the dog a walk. I'll have them do an automatic sit when halted. Then I stand in front of them. I'll have them do a down, a sit. I'll have them come to me, back into a heel, back into a walk. I do that so much, I don't even think about it. And I know I've done it too much. When I have the dog, I tell them to sit and I go to step and turn and the dog lays down. They go, oh, I know what you're doing. When a dog starts to anticipate what you're going to do and they do the behavior before you tell them to do, you know you've done too many patterns and you have to randomize it a little bit. But that was a good question. Best dog trainer ever. I really appreciate that. I don't think I'm the best dog trainer ever. I still have a long way to go. There are some incredible dog trainers out there. Definitely looking to do a 1 hour virtual session. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm looking forward to that as well. Taught bark on command to help with my hush command. Yes, and that's something that Larry and I talked about, and that's something that Bow Wow Bill and myself talked about, and that's something, I'm drawing a blank on his name, but the Nay Popo, the one Bart talks about. If we teach one behavior, we want to teach the opposite. It makes it more clear in the dog's mind. I learned more about myself in the last 4 weeks than I did in the last 10 years teaching my dog. That is awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Drew. For real, thanks, Nate. Pink Floyd was wrong. You make cool bricks and build cool walls. Sorry I'm late. Okay, what do you think of Clicker? I have a border collie in Scotland. For me, they are taught on farms with whistles and commands. So that's another good question. So clickers are great. The reason why I don't use clickers is because a lot of times I have multiple dogs out. Like with my own dogs, I take them out. I have a bunch of dogs out. And if I have my hands full, so like let's say I take all 3 of my dogs out and I'm doing an exploration or I'm just letting them walk around in a big field or we're on a hike, I have 3 remote collars, 1 for each dog. Then I have treats. I have leashes for the dogs. I have all, and not attached. I'll hold the leashes, so I'll have them strapped in case I need them. But I have all this gear. Having an extra clicker for me becomes difficult. But clickers are really great. A lot of people use them for free shaping exercises. A lot of trainers like to use them because it's very, very consistent. It's very clear. Clickers don't have emotional sounds, so it's always click, 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 click. It always sounds exactly the same, and it's easier for most people to separate 2 physicals. Click, treat. Click, treat. It's much more difficult to do that with a physical and a verbal. Yes, treat. That's much harder. So there is some value to clickers. Whistles are also great. A lot of trainers, including myself, have used whistles for things like a recall. Very easy to recall your dog with a whistle. Now, I haven't used a whistle for my own dogs in a long time, ever since I started using the tone, because if my dogs get too far away, I just hit the tone on the remote collar, which activates their collar and it goes ee, and they go, oh, I got to come back to Nate. So I use that now. I don't use the whistle, but you can use all kinds of different tools to make different sounds that work for you. Remember, for our dogs, the sound means what it predicts. If whistle predicts recall, whistle means recall. If click predicts treat, click means treat. So our sounds mean what they predict to the dog. And that's the easiest way to look at it, in my opinion. Where were we? Good afternoon, Mike. Thanks for joining us. Prey drive is a must for high-level obedience. It definitely makes it more fun, that's for sure. Pray and play. Did you talk about nail trimming for puppies? No, I have not talked about that. So with nail trimming, if it is something that you're going to do, so I'll be very straight. I don't trim my dog's nails. That may sound like, oh, you don't trim your dog's nails. I don't have to. And the reason why I don't have to is because I take my dogs out every single day. So I do walks with them every day. I do exploration. I do some sort of play and train almost every day. I don't get the play and the train every day. I miss days with that, but I do always take them out. And because of that, my dogs on average get about 10 miles a day. And because they get about 10 miles a day, I'm not doing 10 miles, they are. But since they get about 10 miles a day, that trims their nails down just from walking on the sidewalk, running through the fields. And so they never need their nails trimmed. Dogs that tend to be a little bit more stationary, they hang out the house more, those dogs we need to trim their nails. But if you have a puppy, it's good to start building positive association to all those things. So that's part of imprinting a puppy. We have a little puppy. I always try to make it positive. So I scratch dogs a lot under their ears right here. I scratch here, I scratch their chest, and then as I'm scratching here, it feels nice, and I rub their ear a little bit, like a little massage, so I get them used to that. Then I go back to scratching their neck. I pet down, I'll reach their paw, and I'll do a little bit of massaging on their paw. I come back up, I pet the top. So I'm getting them comfortable being touched all over, but in a way that's positive. Doing a massage, essentially. It's like I'm taking like, oh, you're a good puppy, and I get their ears a little bit, you're such a good baby. Or I might give them treats, so I'm giving them treats, pretend I'm giving them treats, and I'm petting their paws, very nice, you're such a good puppy. I'm not holding the snout, they're taking food. This is just for demonstrations. I never grab a dog's snout, the dog's taking food. And so I get the dog very comfortable being touched everywhere. So then when you take them to the vet, or if you do take them to a groomer, or you want to do it yourself, it's very easy. Some dogs, you can just start clipping their nails right away, especially depending on how they're bred and how the breeder is. So the breeder that I got Charlie from, really great breeder, and Charlie right out of the box can't, like, you could clip his nails because they do all that stuff in the breeding program. So it makes it really, really easy. So it's nice to have a really good breeder that does these steps initially for you. But if you didn't have that, doing that helps. Sometimes just having the click and making the click noise around without actually clicking the dog's nails. So I rather take it slow and build the dog up than trying to rush and make it to where, oh, now I created an issue. So like, let's use French ring as an example. One of the exercises, the dog has to go at the decoy, and the decoy has a blank or a pistol that fires blanks, and they fire 2 pistol shots into the air. Well, if I go, let's see how the dog handles it, and I send the dog in, the dog's having a great time biting the decoy, and then they fire, and the dog goes, whoa, that was a lot, and backs up. Now I have to fix all that. So it's easier to introduce it in a way where we're pretty certain the dog can handle it, and we gradually make it more difficult in a sense as the dog gets better. So it's like, oh, I'm going to click one nail. Yay, all done. So we don't have to go right to doing all of it. I like to work things in a way that's progressive, and I build the dog up over time, and I don't rush it. If you want to do it my way, where you just make sure you get the dog like 10 miles a day, that's a great option as well. Okay, we're going to end this in about 10 minutes. 10 miles a day. Again, I'm not doing the 10 miles. They are. So I might get in, like I'll do about a mile walk with them in the evening. That 1 mile will be about 3 miles for them, maybe more. Because as I'm walking, let's say this is me, my dog's going like this the whole time, back and forth, smelling here, smelling there. So they're getting way, way more than I am. I take them to the field. I play fetch almost every day. There's nothing wrong with fetch. I've done it for a long time, never had any issues. If you've heard anything different, I like to look at things the way my good friend, amazing dog trainer, Bethany Perdome. It's not a problem unless it's a problem. If I'm doing something and I start to realize, okay, this is a problem, then I'm going to adjust. But to me, fetch has always been something big I do with all my dogs. And what I've been doing more recently with my dogs, which has been great, is I have a ball on a rope for each one of them. I'll throw it. One dog will go get, and you can launch a ball on a rope pretty far. Then the other dog will come to me. I'll play tug a little bit. As the other dog's coming back out, I'll throw that one. Then I'll play tug again. So it's a really great exercise, and it's very interactive. So I've been doing that way more now instead of the chuck it, and I've been enjoying that quite a bit. Do you have to trip the old? So, my oldest, my Malinois back here, she's 10 years old, and she runs just as much as the other dogs. So if we keep our dogs fit and active, then they'll stay that way. Also, she gets certain vitamins and supplements, just like myself. I'm 41, so I take Omega, I take CoQ10, I take vitamin D. We take these different vitamins to help substitute what we're not getting in our diet, which helps with a lot of longevity. So these little things matter. So she runs just as much as Maverick, my youngest. Will you make a new scent detection search and rescue tutorial? I've watched your scent detection videos and those are great, but have you a new method for training? I haven't done much scent detection training, to be honest, but what I think would probably be worthwhile is to do a scent detection program with another trainer that primarily does scent detection. This is something that's come up a few times, and I have a few friends that they specialize in scent detection, so they're going to be better than I am, and I think it might be worth just doing a course with them for the channel. So let me know what you think about that. A lot of the scent detection stuff that I did in those videos, if I am doing it now, I still follow the same process. We teach the dog that there's value to the smell. We can pair it with a primary reinforcer, like putting it on a ball, then transitioning that to where they get the reward from finding the odor. Someone mentioned in one of my comments, someone I'm working with who's training her service dog, where she goes, you know, based on what I've been learning, it sounds like I essentially taught the odor as a marker to the dog. Dog finds the odor, gets a reward. And I was like, exactly right. That is kind of what we're doing. If a dog gets to the odor and then that predicts a reward, then eventually we see a change of behavior when the dog gets to the odor in order to get the reward. So the dog is basically becoming classically conditioned. And then we can follow that up with telling the dog what behavior we want them to do. And then adjusting according to the goals. Like this person I was talking about just a moment ago, we were talking yesterday about teaching the dog an independent search. This is how I do an independent search, meaning the dog does the search on their own. I start with a location where I have the odor. So let's say, just for instructional purposes, let's say in the backyard on the porch, I put one of my cinder blocks and I put an odor in there. I let my dog out, my dog sees it, goes over, smells it. If my dog doesn't investigate it, I could even show my dog, like, hey, look over here. My dog goes over there, smells it. I tell the dog to do the behavior, or the dog is already indicating, which they should be at that point, and then I reward the dog. And then I do this every day. I can even change the location if I want. If the dog knows, okay, I go out there, I might find an odor, then I'll remove it for a little while, or I'll have it out and there won't be an odor. So the dog will go to it, oh, no odor, and walk away. Dog will go to it, no odor, walk away. Dog will go to it. Third time, there's an odor, I reward the dog. So I start teaching the dog, hey, you can find this odor on your own, and if you do and you indicate, I'll reward you for it. So we always set up the circumstances to get the dog to do the behavior that we want. And we can do a lot of that, and this is something that's really big with raising a puppy, is management, setting up the environment to be productive for the dog's training. And we can do that with an older dog too, and this is just kind of like an example of that. Yes, I am going to be getting Bethany on again. I'm also getting, so tomorrow I'm doing the follow-up live Q&A with my buddy Bow Wow Bill. And then the week after that, I don't have anyone for that week, but the week after that one, we're going to be doing one with Maureen Cuccinella. Maureen Cuccinella is awesome. So, and Bethany's awesome. I also have Michael Ellis lined up. I have Bart Bellin lined up. Let me show you, for those of you that do not know who Maureen Cuccinella is, I'll show you real quick. Again, she's awesome. Here we go.
Over time to actually build their confidence with being picked up as well. All right, next up, we're teaching the dog to
this
put
is
their
Maureen
feet
Cuccinella.
On your
she
feet
was kind
while they're
enough to
between
do
your legs, okay? So I call this.
She was kind enough to do the trick series for me on my YouTube channel, and she was a student at Commerce School when I was an instructor, and far one of the best students I've ever seen go through that school. And she's been obsessed with this ever since she was, I don't know, like 8 or 9 or something like that. And she does stop learning. So she recently graduated from teaching with conflict. She's done multiple other courses. She competes with her dog, wins titles. I mean, so she's going to be the first week of May and the second week of May. The first week of May, so Austin 0 to Hero. And that video is on my channel, by the way, if you just type Nate Schoemer Tricks. And I'll show you real quick 0 to Hero. And he hasn't been training dogs that long, but he is really, really good. So I've very rarely you come across someone like Austin, obsessed with training and learns really fast and is really good. And again, I'm not just saying that. I mean, he's an excellent trainer. He has some good content. Definitely go check out his channel. But I'm going to have him on the last 2 weeks of May. I haven't set the date for Michael Ellis yet, so he's looking at his schedule, but he has confirmed it. I'm also I'm going to try to get some of the instructors from Sit, Stay, Learn. So we already had Larry on. He was great. I really want to get Mia on here. I really want to get Omar. I think those will be great. I'm also going to try getting White because they're great. And probably some of these other trainers. I don't know all of them, but this guy's awesome. So Bob Salamini, for those of you that want to do protection work, he's really talented decoy. So if you want to learn decoy work specifically for French ring, but if you can do French ring decoy work, you could do pretty much any decoy work. In my opinion, it's easily one of the hardest, and that guy's awesome. So I've met him at a few trials for French ring. I wasn't competing. I was just a spectator. I came down, hung out, talked to different trainers, but I might try to get him on. So there's a lot of different people I'm trying to get on. So I think that'll be really cool. Let's see if there's any final questions, and then we're going to wrap it up. I'm about to go live with Austin. Make sure to swing by and say hi. Awesome. Bow Wow Bill. Very nice. So, hey, if you guys want to see Austin and Bow Wow Bill, they're about to do a live on their channel. So go check that out. Very cool. Learn a lot of tricks from Maureen. Yeah, Maureen's so awesome. Is the trick dog lady. Yeah, but she's way more than just tricks. She just loves training. So she'll teach her dogs dozens of tricks, high level obedience. Really great. Do you recommend a girl or a boy German Shepherd? That depends on your goals. So if you are doing protection sport, most protection sport dog trainers are going to say you're going to have a much greater chance at reaching the top level with a male German Shepherd or Malinois, whatever. I like both males and females. I've had fun training male and female dogs. So really, I think it's personal preference. Ari, she's a female Malinois, and she's my all-time favorite dog. She's just the best. So it's going to be personal preference. But if you're trying to do protection work, based on what I've heard and seen, you're going to have greater odds reaching high levels with a intact male. Doesn't guarantee it though, but if you're looking at odds, that's what the numbers say. But again, personal preference. Like if you prefer female dogs, get a female dog. You're going to end up having a better relationship if you get the gender that you want. Michael Ellis is the godfather. I agree. He definitely is. Do you ever think you could do a live chat for Border Collie working dogs? Yes, I think that would be cool. If you have any name suggestions, I'd love to reach out to someone who specializes in that. And then the decoy name, Bob Salamini, I think is how you pronounce his name. You can see if you scroll down, he's right here. So the name, oh, well, it's not letting me highlight it. Bob Salamini. Again, really, really excellent decoy. So if you're like, hey, I want to get better at decoy work, that's where I would start. And you can't beat the price, $79. So I actually am going to be getting this course. I haven't gotten it yet. Just the other day, I got this course. I haven't started watching it yet, and this course. So I'm looking forward to checking those out. And when you sign up and you get your courses, you go to my account up at the top, and then it'll show you the courses that you have. So these are all the ones on mine. I like jiu-jitsu, so they also have jiu-jitsu courses because it's attached to BJJ Finale. Trying to pick up someone and become a better trainer. Okay, awesome. A good intro into IGP or something protection. I'm in Houston. If anyone knows resources here, I think my buddy Sergio Esquivel might be close to Houston. I'm not 100%. sure. How's Maverick doing? Are you going to do sports with him? Maverick's doing really well. He's awesome. I've been doing a lot of tug play with him. Haven't trained him specifically for any sport except for IGP, and I did that for a little while I was in Oregon, but not enough to make him proficient in it. How old was Maverick in the first puppy video? I think he was about 8-9 weeks old, so I started him really early. By the way, Ari is so awesome. Yep, she is my favorite. I love that dog. Okay, let me see. I think that's going to be about everything. Any final questions? Doesn't look like any final questions are coming through. All right. Well, that's it for today's Q&A then. I hope this was helpful. I hope each and every one of you feel more confident in your training, whether you're working through the course or just starting out. Remember, better understanding leads to better behavior. So keep learning, keep leading, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for joining me.